Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of True Consequences Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Carter-Landin, and before we get started, I need to give you a few updates. First of all, I want to say thank you so much to Jackie Moranty for writing and researching this script. I also need to thank my latest patron and coffee supporters. Thank you, Leela S. and Lisa M for supporting me on ko-fi.com/true consequences. I also need to thank Sabrina A, Wendy C, and Christine D for being my latest patron subscribers. Okay, let's get into the story. Tucumcari, New Mexico is rich in history. 10,000 years ago, prehistoric hunters stalked mastodons and mammoths in the area. Dinosaurs roamed the landscape, and today their footprints can still be seen. Anasazi tribes grew squash, beans, and corn in the rich soil along the waterways. Artifacts found in the area show that there was a thriving center for trading among many ancient tribes. Tucumcari Mountain once provided an excellent vantage for Apache and Comanche hunters. The name Tucumcari is derived from a Comanche word Tucumcari, meaning to lie in wait for something to approach. By the mid-1800s, the mountain was used by the Comanche, who would raid the cattle drives along the Chisholm and Comanchero trails. The town began as a tent city after Chicago, Rock Island, and Union Pacific Railroad came through in 1901 and was known as, quote, Ragtown. It would later be called Six-Shooter Siding because so many gunfights broke out there. In 1908, the camp would be turned into a division point by the railroad and would be renamed Tucumcari. By 1910, the town was a thriving railroad town with a roundhouse, a depot, and a water tower. In 1926, the mother road, Route 66, was in full swing. Travelers from all over the U.S. would visit Tucumcari by carload. Gas stations, motor courts, gift shops, and cafes would line the streets of the bustling little town. Today, the town boasts a little over 5,000 residents, and it is the largest city between Albuquerque and Amarillo. Situated 176 miles east of Albuquerque along I-40, the town is still part of the historic Route 66 byway. The town slogan, Tucumcari Tonight, can be seen written in neon along I-40 at one of the exits. People still take the Route 66 road trip across the country, and Tucumcari doesn't disappoint. Several of the motor courts, restaurants, gift shops, and service stations date back to the 1930s, 40s, and even 50s. The Sundowner Gallery and Gifts was situated in a remodeled residence at 1701 South 1st Street, the perfect location to catch the eyes of tourists coming through on Route 66. Owners Bill and Juanita Curry established the business in 1994. Bill was an artist who worked in several museums, and his artwork and sculptures were on display at the gallery, as well as handcrafted jewelry, handbags, and clothing from local artists. Joan Vance was 62 years old and worked part-time at the Sundowner Gallery. Joan had been working 2 days a week at the store since the previous November. She lived on a ranch outside of town with her husband, James. She was the only one working on January 20th, 2004. She called her daughter, Jennifer, at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon to tell her that she was going to ask permission to close the store early. Usually, she closed around 5:30, but that day, she wanted to close at 5. She told her daughter that she had only one customer all day, and all she sold was one necklace. Joan and Jennifer stayed on the phone for a while longer, talking about what they were going to have for supper that evening. And then the conversation ended. When Joan didn't arrive home by 5:45, Jennifer called the store again. There was no answer. She then called her mother's cell phone and got no answer there either. That's when Jennifer became worried. Joan was not one to be late without calling someone and letting them know. When Joan didn't show up by 6 o'clock, Joan's husband James went to check on her at the store. James called Jennifer when he arrived at the store. He told her that all the lights were on and Joan's car was parked in the lot. He said that he would go inside the store and call Jennifer back after he found out what was going on. Bill Curry would later tell police that the protocol for customers was that the lights in the store would remain off until a customer came in. The clerk would welcome them into the main gallery and then escort them through the store, turning on the lights as they went. During closing, the clerk would lock the doors and then do a walkthrough of the store and cash out their drawer. Most sales were through credit cards, and usually there was about $200 in the cash drawer. Every sale would have a cash register receipt and a handwritten receipt written by the clerk. James walked to the back of the store, and since the door wasn't locked, he went inside to check on Joan. He called out for her, and when there was no answer, he made his way to the front of the store. He found Joan lying face up on the floor. Her glasses were lying next to her, and her shoes were off. At first, James thought that she had fallen, and then he saw blood on her head. He touched her, and her skin was cold. He checked to see if she was breathing, and he couldn't tell. He felt for a pulse, but didn't find one. He called Jennifer at the ranch and told her to call 911. A few minutes later, medics arrived and tried to revive Joan. They put her in an ambulance and took her to the hospital, where she was pronounced dead. At the hospital, it was discovered that Joan had suffered a gunshot wound to the back of her head. When the Tucumcari police found out that Joan had been shot, they went back to the Sundowner and cordoned it off as a crime scene. They also requested that state police be called to assist with the investigation. As police were going through the store, they found that the cash drawer had been removed from the cash register. The paper money was missing, but there was still change in the drawer. The bottom desk drawer had been removed and was sitting on the floor next to the desk. There was a pin with a cap that was found on the floor next to the desk and a clothes hanger that was found on the floor between the cash register counter and the wall. A purse was on the desk and a bag of clothing was found on the floor next to the desk. The police also found a partially handwritten receipt for a dress jacket and a scarf. The receipt number was 11999. These items had not been calculated into the register. There was also a register receipt for an item priced $15.49, but there was no handwritten receipt to go with this item. The necklace that Joan had sold earlier in the day had both a register receipt and a written receipt. The written receipt for this item was 11998. The items that corresponded with receipt number 11999 were collected as evidence, and the bag that the clothing was in would later be found to have 2 latent palm prints and a latent fingerprint on it. Prints were also found on the back door to the business, the cash register, and the cash drawer. DNA samples were taken from several items as well. Joan's purse was found in the back room, and there was $40 in cash in the purse, and it seemed to be undisturbed. The back door to the store was standing open when police arrived. There were footprints in the gravel from someone who appeared to be running away from the store. There were no signs that Joan had fought with her attacker. It seemed that she wasn't aware of any threat to her safety. Several items in the store could have been knocked over in a struggle, but nothing was. The keys to the shop were left on the counter, and it appeared that nothing was stolen except for the cash in the drawer. In a town of 5,000 people, gossip and rumors will be abundant. Any stranger in town is looked upon with suspicion, and everyone knows everyone, and they also know everyone's business. In the days following Joan's murder, tips would pour into the Tucumcari Police Department. Neighborhoods would be canvassed, and security cameras would be checked. Several suspects would be interviewed, and leads would be followed up on. One of the first tips came into the Tucumcari Police Department while they were setting up the crime scene. The caller said, quote, "Nick Jasper did it," and then hung up. While Joan's husband James was the actual first suspect, he was cleared fairly quickly. His clothes were taken for analysis, and a .22 handgun was confiscated from him. But since the bullet that had killed Joan was fragmented, the match to the handgun was inconclusive. After analyzing James's clothing, police found that there was no evidence connecting him to Joan's murder. He had also been with his daughter Jennifer for most of the day, feeding cattle and doing other chores on the ranch. The police then went to talk to Nick Jasper. They found him at his apartment with his girlfriend LaDonna Evans and her cousin Cosmo Hurd. As the police were talking with Jasper, LaDonna came out of the back bedroom to ask what was going on. Jasper told her, quote, "I don't know. I guess they're arresting me for murder," end quote. During their interviews, all three denied any knowledge of Joan's murder or the burglary that led up to it. All three were fingerprinted, but since there was no evidence connecting them to the murder, they were free to go. LaToya French was interviewed because she had connections with Nick Jasper and Cosmo Hurd. She told police that she and Cosmo had been at a friend's house celebrating her birthday when the murder took place. Nick was at their home at 5 p.m., and then she and Cosmo left the party. Along the way, they visited with several people and finally ended up at Thomas Ingram's house, where they spent the night. She would also be fingerprinted before she was released. A tipster called the police to report a man named Freddie Powell was the man who killed Joan Vance. Powell was a convicted felon whose prior convictions included murder, burglary, and theft. He had recently been arrested on unrelated charges and was being held at the Quay County Detention Center. During his interview, he said that on the day that Joan was murdered, he was home with his girlfriend Sandra. He said that sometime during the day he went to Terry's liquor store twice. The first time, he paid for his liquor with $1 bills. The second time, he paid with $100 bill that he had gotten for doing some work for his friend, Chris. He denied any knowledge of the incident at the Sundowner Gallery. The police tried to track down Sandra to confirm Freddie's story, but she was never located. Patrick Rivera had heard rumors that he was involved in Joan's murder. He had also heard that he had been arrested for her murder. Rumor also had it that Pablo Benavides, who was a sheriff's deputy in Logan, New Mexico, was telling everyone that Patrick was involved in the murder of Joan Vance. Patrick voluntarily showed up at the police station in Tucumcari to clear things up. He told police that on the day of Joan's murder, he was home with his grandmother, Mary Ann. He said that he was home all day until 3 p.m. He and his grandmother then went to school to pick up his kids when school got out at 3:15. After that, they went to pick up Patrick Jr. Patrick Sr. drove all the kids back to his grandmother's house, and they met his mother there. He and his grandmother followed his mother to the bank where she gave him some money so he could pay her bills. He then took his grandmother around town paying bills and running errands until 5 o'clock. After that, he went to pick up Patrick Jr. at the Tucumcari Vocational School. Patrick told police that he and his grandmother then went home. He left for a few minutes to go to his mother's house where he picked up his nieces. His mother asked Patrick to watch the girls for the evening since she wasn't feeling well. He brought his nieces back to his grandmother's house and didn't leave again until the next day. Patrick let the police know that he had heard rumors about who killed Joan Vance also. He mentioned LaDonna and Nick Jasper. He also said there was some kid that was related to Jerry Ingram who may be involved. It's worth mentioning that the names that Patrick dropped as potential suspects were the same people who were spreading the rumors that he was involved. Patrick's grandmother was also questioned, and she corroborated Patrick's story. Bill and Juanita Curry's son, Toby, was also interviewed in connection with the murder. Toby told police that he hadn't been at the gallery on the day that Joan was murdered. He called the gallery about 10 minutes to 5 looking for his parents, but when he spoke to Joan, she said that his mother had left the store about an hour before to attend a meeting at church with his father. He said nothing seemed out of the ordinary when he talked to Joan. He chatted with her for a few minutes, and then she told him she didn't have any customers in the store at that time. He said he hung up the phone with Joan and started to make dinner for his family. At about 7:20 p.m., Toby heard the code blue at the gallery come over the police scanner. He left his house and ran the 8 blocks to the gallery, thinking that something had happened to his mother. When he realized it wasn't his mother, he asked if Joan was all right, and police told him that she had died. Police asked him if he would take a polygraph, and he refused. When they mentioned that he seemed nervous and uncomfortable and they thought he had more information on the incident, he got up and left quickly. When questioned by his wife Paula and his nephew, Thomas told the same story that Toby had had about the day that Joan was killed. A few days later, police went to Toby's job site to ask him again if he would take a polygraph. He refused. He told officers that he was a nervous man and couldn't take the polygraph without incriminating himself. Police attempted to retrieve surveillance video from the area, but of the 34 businesses around the Sundowner Gallery, Only the Circle K had cameras. The video for the night of the burglary was put into evidence. Neighbors around the gallery didn't seem to be of much help. Some had just seen strangers walking past their homes, others had noticed transients arguing, most hadn't noticed anything out of the ordinary. Because Tucumcari is situated directly off of I-40, many people will pass through for a night or two on their way somewhere else. Some of these people are homeless and looking for a better life as they move east or west along Highway 40. Some run out of money in Tucumcari and get stuck there until they can find means to move on. Several transients would be mentioned as suspicious people after Joan's death, but most would never be found by the police for questioning. James Evans was the manager of the Apache Hotel at the time. He called police about an incident at the hotel that happened the day after Joan was killed. He told police that a man came into the hotel 3 times and spoke with him. The first time he came in, he asked for a job. James told him that he didn't think the hotel was hiring at the time. He didn't have any applications available. The man then asked about hotel security. He wanted to know if the hotel had guard dogs. Before he left, the man asked James about the murder at the Sundowner Gallery. James told him that he didn't have any details on the murder. About 30 minutes later, the man came back. He again asked about employment, so James wrote out a list of businesses in the area that might be hiring. The man explained that he was from the West, and this was his first time in New Mexico. He then asked again about the homicide. He asked James, quote, if they killed the lady, end quote. James told him that he knew Joan had been killed, but again, he didn't have any details. The man left. About an hour later, he returned, and he asked about the area and again asked for a job. James told him that he was busy and the man should come back when the supervisor was available. He left for the last time. This person is described as white, with an average build, about 5 foot 10 inches tall, with a light complexion and no facial hair. He wore baggy khaki pants, a short-sleeved shirt, and appeared to be unsheltered. Sherry Anaya would have a similar story. About a week before Joan was killed, a man walked into Sherry's beauty shop. Her nephew was there, but had just gone into the bathroom when the man came in. Sherry said the man seemed anxious and nervous. He asked several times if she was alone in the shop. She wouldn't answer him. He kept trying to look past Sherry into the room that was behind her. The man asked how much she charged for a haircut, and that's when Sherry's nephew came out of the bathroom. When the man saw her nephew, he hurried out the door. Sherry described the man as 45 to 57 years old, approximately 5 foot 6 inches tall, weighing about 155 to 160 pounds. He had mid-length gray hair, a small to medium build, and was light complected. He wore baggy, faded blue jeans and a blue and white sports jacket and ball cap. A minister at a local church, Warren Colbank, came forward to report an incident that had occurred on the day that Joan was murdered. He said that he received a call at about 1 o'clock in the afternoon from a couple traveling through New Mexico on their way to California. The couple had received a voucher from the local shelter, Casa de la Hope, to stay in a local motel for the night. They were requesting money from the church. After the call, Mr. Colbank didn't hear from the couple again. He said that he was contacted by transients frequently requesting money for their travel. On June 1, 2004, fingerprint analysis began to come in from the crime lab in Santa Fe. The crime lab had found 2 partial palm prints and a latent fingerprint on the bag that had clothing in it. The palm prints didn't belong to either Joan Vance or Nick Jasper. On June 23, 2004, Crime Lab sent more correspondence regarding the prints. This time, Cosmo Hurd, Orlando Fields, Leo Marquez, Peter Rivera, Brian Painbuff, Derek Shaw, Albert Baca, and Charles Newman were all eliminated because the prints were not theirs. The third correspondence from the Crime Lab came again on August 19th. This analysis eliminated Billy Curry and James Vance. The crime lab had also entered the prints into the automated fingerprint identification system, and there were no prints in the system that matched the ones in evidence. The fourth correspondence came in on August 24th, and LaDonna Evans was eliminated. It's important to remember that just because the fingerprints didn't match any of the suspects, that doesn't eliminate them from the suspect pool. The fingerprints on the bag could belong to anyone who touched the bag, including someone in the factory who made the bag. On February 1st, 2006, the FBI informed the Tucumcari police that the case had been entered into VICAP as a cold case and that it could be compared against all existing and future case submissions. By July of 2007, LaToya French was still in jail. She asked police if they would interview her because she had information about the murder of Joan Vance. She told police that 2 days after their murder, a friend of hers, LaShawn Martinez, told her that her brother Jeff Clark had killed Joan Vance. LaToya told police that Jeff had given her the gun he used in the robbery. She said that she hid the gun at her grandfather's house, but LaShawn had gone to her grandfather's house and retrieved the gun, and he didn't know what happened to it after that. She told police that when Jeff committed the murder, he was wearing a baby blue Tar Heels jacket that belonged to her. Jeff had given the jacket to his girlfriend at the time, Lorraine Dormand, and she got rid of it for him. LaToya told police that Lorraine had recently been paroled and was living in Irvine, Texas, but Jeff was still living in Tucumcari. On May 11th, Jared Smith, an inmate at the Quay County Detention Center, advised police that he had information about the weapon used to kill Joan Vance. Jared told officers that his brother Adam Smith had been arrested in Santa Rosa and that the state police had seized the firearm as evidence. Smith provided information about the firearm that coincided with what police already knew about the firearm used in Joan's murder. The gun was taken from Santa Rosa police and placed into evidence in Clovis, New Mexico, in their evidence vault, with all other evidence connected to Joan's case. This gun was a .22 caliber Ruger revolver. By 2017, there was still not enough evidence to convict anyone of the murder of Joan Vance. Police began inventorying and cataloging all the evidence they had, but there were no firm answers or any real suspects in her murder. There was only speculation and rumors. In 2018, the New Mexico State Police resubmitted several items of evidence to the crime lab. They requested DNA and print analysis of several items that had been taken into evidence when Joan was murdered. The DNA samples were too small for analysis and the prints didn't match anyone in the system. Joan's murder remains unsolved, but the case is still open and being worked today. Joan was a wife and a mother. It's been 18 years and Joan's daughter Jennifer is still waiting for answers and justice for her mother's murder. Jennifer's daughter never knew her grandmother. The loss reverberates throughout the family. Tucumcari is still a very small town, and as we've seen, rumors and speculation can take over a murder investigation in a town that small. But those communities are tight, and everyone knows everyone else's business. Someone knows something. This case is solvable. There is plenty of evidence being held. There are still lots of tongues that could wag. Joan's case didn't get a lot of media attention, and to this day, not many know what happened in Tucumcari on January 2004. But the people of Tucumcari know, and maybe if we talk about it, it will encourage them to come forward. If you have any information about the murder of Joan Vance, please call the Tucumcari Police Department at 575-461-2160 or call the New Mexico State Police at 505-841-9256. Thanks for listening and stay safe, New Mexico.